Sensei Mui here, also known as Shaku Mui, Shinshi, Ajari, with a lot of different titles and names. Anyway, we're here by ourselves today because we had a class this morning, a really great class with a group that started with me 2.5, 3 years ago. And it's a class that deals strictly with an ethnic minority. And it was interesting because this group started out as a generalized study in Buddhism. And over time, we ventured into some of the Vajrayana techniques, particularly Mahamudra and things of that nature. And finally, we're definitely a Zen group now because this is where the students are at. And so there's this interestingly, when in the United States anyway, when we think of an ethnic minority, we think of people that are very, very faith-driven. And so the group kind of turned into a unification of Pure Land and Zen, although those words were never used, oddly enough, except during the classes when I was making reference to them. So a question came up during the class today, which deserves a nice answer, a substantial answer, one that you just can't run around and say, well, I'll give you an answer in 150 words or less. And the question involved what keeps me from being enlightened? That's what the individual asked, and that's pretty much a quote. What keeps me from being enlightened? And the answer, the short answer, the Zen answer would be one single thought. And that leads to another question, well, which thought is that? And the short answer is any thought. But then it's nice to know how that works, right? You sort of want to know what that thought might be. And so let's talk about that for a few minutes, because that's a very interesting question. It's a very germane question. It's a question that I think most students of Dharma would be interested in pursuing. What is it that stops me from being enlightened 24/7? Now, in the Tendai school, which traces its lineage back to Zhi Yi in China, who founded the Tiantai monastery. I doubt that Zhi Yi ever thought that he was founding a new school of Buddhism. For Zhi Yi, Buddhism was Buddhism, period. Although he never used that word either. That's a westernized word. He used the word Dharma. Or probably most often, Tao. And it's the way we think. And let me start this off with a story. Within the Hongaku school and the Lotus lineage, we use the term ajari when a person has been around for a long time, or when they have completed esoteric Timatsu or Mikyo training, which is Japanese version of Vajrayana. And when they complete that training, they're automatically an ajari. When they, that's in that particular lineage. In other lineages, ajari refers to someone who has completed the 1,000-day training, and then they become an ajari. Then in other schools of Japanese Buddhism, The term ajari is simply the Japanese expression for acharya, which is a mentoring teacher, a counselor. And then in Zen, Soto Zen, ajari is sometimes used to somebody who has done either 5 or 10 angos. That's 90-day retreats. 5 90-day retreats, of course, would be 450 days, and 10 90-day retreats would be 900 days, which is pretty close to the 1,000-day training within Tendai. Anyway, of all of those expressions for ajari, some people might fit 1, they might fit 2 or 3 of those definitions. We were looking at this this morning, and one of the students pointed out, well, you fit 4 out of the 5, so you must be ajari. The reason why ajari is used, it's similar in usage to the Thai term in Theravada, to ajan. Ajan, ajari, same words, different languages. So, and they both mean acharya. Okay, now why did I say all that? Because words are, according to Nagarjuna, what imprison us. Words really do imprison us, because if I don't meet your definition of one thing or that thing, then I can't be that thing. Even though this is absurd. It is truly absurd to think that your definition of a word is going to be the only standard ever used in any language on Earth at any time. And if we ever get to a distant planet, that definition has to hold there too. Bravo, you're a narcissist. You have just made it into a psychiatric journal because you're living in a total, complete delusion. And this is the problem with people that hang on to appellations like, I'm a Zenist, I'm a Tendai, I am a Pure Lander, I am a this, I am a that, I am such. Where are these words found in the Buddhist scriptures? They're not. So we invented some words to say that we practice in a particular kind of a way. And then we got the idea that because we practice in that way, then that must be the gospel. Got news for you, dude. The gospel ain't even gospel. It too is subject to a vast variety of interpretations. Even within the Buddha's lifetime, there were sects. There were people who had interpreted the Buddha's teaching in this way or that way, and they thought this is the only way to interpret it. Disintegration into sectarian is not simply the phenomena of the biblical religions. It happens in Buddhism too. It happened in Hinduism. It happens in Shintoism. It even happens in Taoism. So, disintegration into sectarianism is not a real good example to use if you're claiming you're on the road to enlightenment. Let's be real. Now, I said Nagarjuna said that words are what imprison us. Well, he also said words are what set us free. Ta-da! What are words? Words are symbols. Words are symbols for things which they are not themselves. We say the word sun, S-U-N. We know what S-U-N refers to, but everybody knows that the letters S-U-N, pronounced sun, is not the sun that we're thinking of. Fine. Pretty obvious. On the other hand, if we say mother, my mother in particular, then I hold this specific concept as gospel. This is my mother, not realizing that the very concept that this is my mother is not my mother. That's just another symbol. Symbols are ingenious. A symbol for something is exactly what it is not. This is why Nagarjuna also said, never, ever, in the wildest of your imagination, mistake the symbol for its meaning. And we do it all the time. We know better. Nagarjuna told us not to do that. The Buddha refers to it over and over and over again in his wisdom teachings in the Nikayas. But do we adhere to that? No. We still have thoughts. We still think somehow those thoughts themselves are real. Not that they represent a reality, but that they in themselves are real. I was teaching class last week to a bunch of psychoanalysts, brilliant people, normally. When I was talking about experience and awareness, every single one of them, except the 2 or 3 Buddhists that were there, that actually study and practice this stuff, kept bringing the discussion back to, but it's only my interpretation of the experience. No. An interpretation of an experience is not the experience itself. It's simply an interpretation. It is a symbolic representation of what you think you may have experienced. It's an abstraction. If I were to say, yes, I practice Zen. I practice Zen within the context of Dogen Zenji. That is an abstraction. That is a shorthand of what I do. It is not what I do. It is an expression of what I think I am doing. But it makes sense to you. Why does it make sense? Because you're getting linear bits of information, one bite at a time, so you can ingest it. If I told you to go out and drink the Atlantic Ocean in one gulp, of course you couldn't do it. You might be able to do it if you used a cup and drank it 1 cup at a time. It would take you an infinitely long time, but, especially with the glaciers melting, but it is conceivably possible to drink it 1 cup at a time. At least you could give it a shot. So if I said, my standard practice is Zen, you can grasp that. You have no idea what my practice actually looks like, but you have a rough idea. When we talk about enlightenment, we have a rough idea of what that could mean. We don't know what enlightenment is until we get there. So words are incredibly tyrannical, and it just so happens we think in words. Somehow we have gotten this idea drummed into us ever since we were children that if we can express something in words, it is much more real than if we just let it be. We've even been conned into thinking that we can multitask and hold two or more thoughts at one time. There's no multitasking. That's a myth. There's simultaneous tasking, or I'm doing one thing, not paying attention to that and thinking about something else. It's like cooking dinner and thinking about a presentation you have to give. Well, while you're thinking about the presentation, you're burning the beans and the rice and ruining dinner. So, this is why the expression in Zen arose: when hungry, eat; when sleeping, when tired, sleep; when hungry, just eat; when doing this, just do this; when doing that, just do that. Not thinking about something else, cooking dinner and mentally repairing the car. It doesn't work. You can do one thing or the other. You can't do them both successfully at the same time. Try this experiment sometime. While multiplying 1,321 by 3 in your head, try that while you're pulling on your earlobe, paying attention to pulling your earlobe. You can't do the math problem and pay attention to pulling your earlobe at the same time. You might be able to switch back and forth very rapidly so you have the illusion that you're doing it, but it's only an illusion. Like a thought is only an illusion. When I say a thought is an illusion, most people go, oh, well, you're saying thoughts aren't real. I get it. I'm not saying that at all. Look it up. An illusion is something that appears to be that which it is not. It doesn't make it unreal, but what you're perceiving is not real. So when I'm thinking that my thoughts about my experience are my experience, that's an illusion. It's not real. The thought is real. The interpretation of the thought is not. It's the difference between being real and being valid. Emotions are real. Why not? They're thoughts. They're thoughts based upon either pleasure or displeasure. That's all they are. There's nothing special about them, but we run away with them thinking that they're special because they feel so powerful. And we never notice that we're thinking while we're experiencing these emotions. If we could just experience the emotion without adding thought to it, 90% of our existential suffering, that which we call dukkha, could be abandoned, could be renounced, let go of, not held on to. The difference between that which is conditioned and that which is unconditioned, listen carefully, is a thought. When we think about things, we condition them. This is why the Buddhas would say to us that which is conditioned gives us suffering. Because when we condition things, mentally condition them, we give them meaning. And suffering only exists where there is meaning. Without meaning, there is no suffering. And nothing, no thing has meaning to it in and of itself. We give it meaning. We decide what this means. That is conditioned. Why do we believe this? Because it is a kind of a truth. If I point, there's a tree over here, a Norfolk pine. If I point to that and I call it a tree, that is a conventional reality because we have all gotten together. Those of us who speak English have agreed that that is going to be called a tree. That is a category of existence called tree. It participates in treeness. It has roots, it has bark, it has leaves, it has branches, it needs earth, it requires light, it needs water. All these things that we attribute to treeness. It's a tree. And then we further categorize that into Norfolk pine. Not just any pine, it's a Norfolk pine. That is conventional reality. We have all agreed on that. And what that is an abstraction. Why is it an abstraction? Because it's a concept. It's only an idea. If we spoke German, we would say it's a Baum. Use a different word because Germans have agreed that that's what that object is called. Conventional truth. Well, if that's conventional truth, what is its opposite? What we call ultimate truth. Absolute truth. I hate those words. I don't like them because absolute truth is absolute only in relationship to something else. We're conceptualizing again. Yes, we are, you little muffy-roo, you. Let's use the Buddha's words. Paramatthatsatya. What does that mean? Our word parameter comes from paramattha. It means beyond borders. Quite literally. Beyond boundaries. When I say that is a tree, it is in a box. It has boundaries. It cannot be anything else but a tree. It can't be a refrigerator. Although we could all tomorrow agree that we're going to call green leafy things with bark, roots, etc. refrigerators. Or boom shakalakas. Let's call them boom shakalakas. We could all agree on that. It's still a conventional truth. It still designates the same thing, but the thing that it designates is not what we're calling it. The boom shakalaka is just another symbol. What lies beyond that symbol is really what that object is. And in order to ascertain what that object is, we have to get rid of the language that puts it in a box. This is so-called absolute reality. Reality, a truth that is without boundaries. This is really what we mean by absolute truth. Truth without a boundary. It's a non-dualistic truth. It's a truth that says that thing over there is part of my experience. And while I'm experiencing, I too am part of that experience. I cannot fragment that experience reasonably into me and it. That is a trick of conventional truth. In absolute truth, there is only the experience without the tyranny of language. Words only have meaning when we give meaning to them. Therefore, some words become offensive. Even our Supreme Court of the United States of America one of the most liberal members on the Supreme Court, an Obama appointee, said there are such things as fighting words. Words so packed with meaning as to become offensive to the point where violence is justified. Have you wrapped your head around that yet? Words have meanings that justify violent reaction? What colors the grass on their planet? It's a word. It's a sound. It's a sound that has no meaning in and of itself. It's another boom shakalaka. But somehow we're going to agree that there is a sound that can stimulate violence, justifiable violence. And violence in and of itself is another word with meaning attached to it. What does violence mean? It means to violate someone. To violate someone, you have to take away one of their presumed rights, which is another concept. So we're adding concept to concept to concept to concept, and we're burying, well, that's a hard word to say, burying our awareness underneath layer upon layer upon layer of words that we're giving meaning to. And we don't even look at them. A woman said to me once that everybody in the world's looking for love. Bullpucky. Excrement from a male bovine. This is not true. Look at it. What people are looking for is emotional security, and they're calling that love. Sometimes it's not even emotional security. This is what keeps us from being enlightened. The stories we tell ourselves in words and symbols. Very arbitrary words, very arbitrary symbols, and we take them to be reality. This is what the ordinary person does. Overthinks everything. Fear would not exist without thinking. Not in our society. Not unless Godzilla is walking down the street ready to step on you. There's no reason to be afraid. We place thoughts and concepts around incidents of our life, like death. People are terrified of death, yet we know nothing about it. Nobody's come back to tell us what death is like, what there lies beyond the grave. There are people that imagine that they have told us about it, but that's them. That's what they think they have experienced. That's what they're interpreting. Don't believe anything just because somebody tells you this or that. Don't believe anything just because you read it in a book. Don't believe anything because an angel came down from heaven to tell you about it. Don't believe anything because some authority had said it. These are the conditions of disbelief, of doubt. It's good, old-fashioned, skeptical doubt. In what then can we believe? in those things we have directly experienced. In the things that you and I directly experience, we often find cognitive dissonance because we're believing the words of an authority. We're believing ourselves that this should be this way. And then when we experience it, it's not. Because we have lied to ourselves about the way things are. Cognitive dissonance does not exist when we're not trying to reinterpret reality to fit our mold. Reality is an incredible thing to experience. Let's try not to reduce it to just another concept. What keeps you and me from being enlightened 24/7? From being a Buddha, a Tathagata, one who has gone to and returned from reality, the absolute. One thought. Sometimes that thought is just a simple I am. Because I is just a concept. When the Buddha talks about kama in the Pali Canon, as distinct from karma in the Vedic literature, which somehow wandered into Mahayana, when the Buddha talks about kama, he talks about it in a way that implies what he's really talking about is the ego. That which we have experienced impacts us. When we think about those things and interpret them in certain ways, there is a specific correlation on how a similar experience will impact us later. Because we're thinking in habitual ways. We're taking the symbols that we explain these experiences to ourselves and mistaking those symbols for what we have actually experienced. This is what keeps us from enlightenment, is the constant desire, the obsession with overthinking, the obsession with taking our thoughts to be what they represent. Without meaning, there is no suffering. There's only life. And how do we give meaning to things? Sometimes we give meanings to things by judging them. This is good, this is bad. What are we really saying? I like this, therefore it's good. I don't like that, therefore it's bad. This is giving meaning to something. To an enlightened person, the idea that anyone can be lonely is laughable. Because there are so many layers of meaning, of craving, of clinging, of desire, of acting out of poverty built into that idea. It is so delusional. It's a story we tell ourselves. Now, some stories are skillful. Compassion, love, empathy. happiness. These can be quite skillful. Other stories we tell ourselves are not quite so skillful. So, I hope that answers that question. And if you like the video, press like. If you don't like the video, turn it off. Thank you. Bye-bye. Sayonara, baby.